Kreeeprs! What's up, you crazy creeps? It is Kleerski. I am back. We are in the heart of Southeast Portland. I'm standing right off of Division here in about 30th, and just got some coffee. And today we are in Southeast because we're going to visit a place we've visited many of times before. We are going to the Lonefir Cemetery to pay our final respects and kind of tell the story, which is really tragic and interesting, of a prostitute that was murdered in Portland, downtown Portland, years ago. And as of today, the case is still unsolved, and it's really creepy, really interesting. So stay tuned. We're gonna creep up to Lonefir Cemetery now, but you're not gonna wanna miss this one. It's really creepy. It's gonna be a good one. All right, guys. We have made it to the Lonefir Cemetery. It is a beautiful cemetery, by the way. Kind of creepy, yet beautiful as well. A lot of prominent Portland folks buried here. A lot of notable people from Portland and Oregon. A lot of people that helped really build the city. And I love these weeping willows through here. Always give it that cool, kind of spooky ambiance. All right, we're looking for section 20, and these blocks down here say 32, so it's not too far from where we're at. One thing I like the best about Lonefir, not just because of the notable folks buried here, but the headstones and the final resting places of folks, you know, that are upright. Not only does it make it easier to find the grave, but I just like the looks of those style of tombs better. Kind of cooler to look at. A lot of them have really beautiful, you know, scribes and inscriptions on them. And it looks like they are having a service here, so we're going to be kind of quiet. But check this out as we walk through. With the leaves falling. Quite peaceful. Right, you guys, we found block 17 through 20. I think the break is this line right here that sections, you know, each part. And I believe, just from pictures that I've seen in the past, we're basically standing directly in front of the headstone. I think it's that one right there. Yep, here it is. Emma Merlotin's final resting place. So what makes this headstone so very interesting is, first of all, the name. Tingri La Cause, which is French, but this is actually the final resting place to a prostitute that was murdered really, really terribly, a very tragic death. Even to this day, with all the other things going on, it's still, you know, back then these things really didn't happen. So this murder really made this story, even to this day, you know, stand out more than most murders or people that were, you know, killed in Portland. I'm not sure why the name La Cause is actually on the final resting place. We're going to take a closer look here in a second. But Emma Merlotin was a very known resident of Portland. She was actually a prostitute, and back then, you know, that was basically considered a profession. A lot of folks used the prostitution as, you know, part of their, you know, kind of like resume, if you will, and it really wasn't frowned upon. It was actually, like, you know, one of the very first you know, professions that a woman could have, and basically there was no ill will behind it. You know, everything that she did was out in the open, and everybody was, you know, kind of okay with it at that point. And as time went along, a lot more people got involved and looked at it as kind of a bad profession, or however you would want to say it. But Emma was actually brutally murdered at her house, which back then they were considered cribs, and they had a section down on Southwest 3rd, which is now the like Microsoft store. Right there is where her murderer basically took a hatchet and killed her. Now, a lot of folks stipulated as to why. Was it, you know, jealousy? Was it a robbery? Was it, you know, we don't know. We don't know to this day. There's been many of stories. There was a famous person by the name of Bunko Kelly, who was kind of an outlaw here in Portland and was in prison for many years. And he said if they helped him, you know, basically reduce his sentence, he could find out who killed her. But to this day, unfortunately, her murder is still unsolved. But what makes this case so very interesting and so very creepy is back when, you know, everything's evolved so much with forensics and DNA and everything that we can do now to solve people's murders and crimes. But back then, there really was none of this happening. So there was a forensics kind of doctor, scientist, and optician, really, who stated that he could basically remove one of Emma's eyeballs and see if he could figure out who the killer was based upon whatever her retina or her eyeball. You know, I'm not an optometrist. I'm not sure how it all works technically, but he was going to see if he could figure out by the last imagery that was kind of, you know, burnt into her eyeball. Unfortunately, it didn't work, but, you know, kind of ahead of the times back then. That was actually really cool thinking, and it was a great thing to try and do to help find her killer. But like I said, unfortunately, even to this day, her murder has never been solved, or even the murder has never been captured. What makes this story, you know, other than her eyeball being removed, which was super creepy, just the pure blunt trauma and, you know, getting murdered by a hatchet. She was hit probably they said 15 times. She was totally unrecognizable. At the time, they weren't sure if it was a robbery, because when she died, they actually found her deceased and hit with a hatchet, but she was still wearing gold earrings, and one of her rings that she actually was wearing at the time came off, and the police noticed that there was actually a dent in it from when she got hit with the hatchet, probably trying to cover herself, or, you know, do some sort of movement with her arm so she wouldn't get, you know, barreled with that hatchet. So gosh, it's just super crazy. And so they kind of maybe outruled it as a robbery, because they thought, well, if it was a robbery, they would have taken everything. Now, another interesting part of this case and this story was she was very wealthy. She was well off, and back when the robbery happened, or, you know, the murder / whatever, the police did investigate and found there was still $14 in cash, which to this day would have been like $500-600, and a ton of jewelry. So they were kind of weary on calling it a robbery. And then years after that, her brother actually had to come in from France to obtain the property that she owned. They were like a co-title, but in fact, he owned a jewelry store as well. So kind of just a really random, maybe act of violence. Who knows? I mean, was it out of maybe, you know, not liking the fact that she was a prostitute? Was it a robbery? Were they doing it for money? Or, you know, who knows? But just a tragic story. And what really is really creepy is the part where they actually cut her eye out. That, to me, I understand that they were trying to do the forensics and figure out who, you know, the body was. But gosh, at that point, I don't know. I mean, you know, to this day, we have people that are anatomical donors and things like that. So it's come a long way since then, but I don't know. I found that to be just super, super cool, but it's also very, very eerie and creepy. So let's take a closer look, though, at her headstone. So if you guys can see, like I said, it says Annie Jean Tingri Lacause, and I'm not sure if that was her, her original maiden name or how that came about, but she actually married a gentleman by the last name Merlotin, and you can see here, deceased December 22nd, 1885. So pretty young too to be killed, no matter what age really, but and like what makes this story so interesting is, like I said, the fact that prostitution really wasn't frowned upon. So the people that were the detectives on the case and the investigators and stuff were just kind of just like not sure as to what happened. So the same night that the case was brought to the detectives' attention, 2 of the detectives that were assigned to the case decided to go down to Southwest 3rd and just kind of check the scene out. And in fact, when they were there, they witnessed a gentleman that was, this part's so weird too, he was kind of lurking around the scene of the crime, and the investigator stopped him, and when they talked to him, he at first tried to, I believe, give him a fictitious name, and then eventually told the detectives that he was scared, and so they actually went to his residence after they detained him, and during the search of the residence, they actually, or his apartment or whatever housing he was in, they found a pair of bloody pants, if you can believe, and actually, this is just so crazy, and I just can't get the fact that they let this guy go. They actually found a hatchet as well, and he explained to the detectives that it was actually paint. He said he had been working and that there was paint, and the detectives took the evidence, and like I said, science and forensics weren't anything like they are today. So they investigated it, and there really wasn't enough substantial amount to do any kind of, forensics work. And back then, things were so not developed as they are now, that all they had to go on was, like a microscope. So they looked at it, and they really couldn't get a full, case built against this guy. So really they let him go. So in my mind, he was probably the killer, returning to the scene of the crime and checking things out. So just a really crazy and tragic story that happened to her at, just trying to make a living and a way for herself. So pretty crazy story though, I have to say. And I do love this cemetery just because it is so full of such interesting stories and folks that have been buried here over the years. But this story, I have to say, out of all the people that we have visited and paid our respects to, this one always, I don't know, it's just kind of weird to me. So, and interesting and cool. And I hope that, by doing these really helps keep Emma's, memory alive anytime we pay our respects. Or visit people's headstones. First and foremost, my goal is to keep their memory alive and their story, out there. And I apologize if I did get any of the story wrong. This is just going off of articles and people's, notes and things that I was able to find online. Definitely a tragic, creepy story, I have to say. And I hope that someday her murder will be solved. And also, one of the neighbors in Southeast was kind enough to let me pick this rose here, and I thought it would be only right to place our rose here honoring Emma and her tragic story. Little memento there for you. City Roses. Rest in peace, Emma.